It was a quiet night on the old farm. The wind moved slowly across the fields, carrying the smell of wet earth. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, and thunder rolled in the distance. Inside the small farmhouse, a man named Thomas sat in his chair. He was tired after a long day of work. His animals were fed, the fields checked, and he was ready to rest. But then he heard something. It was faint at first. A low sound like wood breaking carried on the wind. Thomas frowned. He knew the noises of his farm well. This sound was different. It was sharper, almost like metal scraping against metal. He stood up, his old dog Max raising his head too. The dog let out a soft growl. Thomas grabbed a lantern from the table and lit it. The warm glow pushed away the shadows inside his house, but it could not touch the deep darkness outside. The strange sound came again, this time clearer. It was coming from the barn. For a moment, Thomas thought about ignoring it. It could have been the wind or maybe a loose piece of wood banging around, but something inside him told him this was not normal. He pulled on his coat, took the lantern in one hand, and stepped out into the night. The rain had not started yet, but the air smelled heavy, like the storm was about to break. Lightning flashed across the sky, showing the barn in the distance. Thomas walked quickly, his boots sinking into the soft ground. Max followed close, ears pulled back. As he reached the barn doors, he noticed something odd. The wood looked scorched, like it had been burned. But there had been no fire. Thomas pushed the door slowly, and it creaked open. Inside, the air was warm and smelled strange, like iron and smoke. He lifted his lantern higher. The familiar sight of hay bales, tools, and wooden beams met his eyes, but there were also marks on the ground, black circles burned into the dirt. His brow furrowed. He stepped forward carefully. Then he heard it. A small whimper. Thomas froze. His heart beat faster. He looked around, moving the lantern slowly from one corner to another. The sound came again, soft, weak, almost like a child crying, "Hello?" He called out, his voice unsure. The sound of his own words felt too loud in the silent barn. There was no answer, only the whimper again, this time followed by the sound of movement. Hay shifting near the back. Max barked once, sharp and alert. Thomas moved closer. His lantern light fell on broken wooden planks scattered near the back wall. It looked like something had crashed through. Behind the fallen wood was a pile of hay, and something moved within it. His breath caught in his chest. He stepped closer, slow and careful, not wanting to scare whatever it was. With one hand, he pushed aside some of the hay. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The figure lying there was small, too small to be a grown person. But it was not a child. Its skin glowed faintly, pale with strange silver lines across it. The hair was thin and white, almost like light itself. And the eyes, large, round, and shining softly like stars trapped inside. Thomas gasped, stepping back in shock. Max growled low but did not move forward. The small figure curled tighter, making a weak sound of fear. It was not human. Thomas stood frozen, his mind racing. He had heard stories of strange lights in the sky, of things people whispered about in town but never proved. He had always thought them nonsense. But now in his barn, lying weak and injured, was something from beyond this world. The figure's arm moved slightly, and Thomas saw a deep wound across its leg. The silver lines on its skin flickered like dying light. It was hurt. For a long moment, Thomas did not know what to do. His lantern shook in his hand. Should he run? Should he call someone? His heart told him one thing. This creature was not dangerous, not right now. It was scared, just like any child would be. He took a slow breath and knelt down, setting the lantern on the floor. The warm light spread softly across the hay, touching the small figure. "It's all right," Thomas whispered, though he wasn't sure if the creature could understand him. The figure's shining eyes blinked at him. Its lips moved, but the sound was strange, like whispers in a language he had never heard. Then its hand lifted weakly. For a brief second, the tips of its fingers glowed, casting a strange blue light across the barn walls. Thomas stared, wide-eyed, caught between fear and awe. The glow faded quickly, and the figure collapsed back into the hay, breathing weakly. Outside, thunder roared. The storm had arrived. Heavy drops of rain starting to fall against the barn roof. Inside, Thomas and Max remained still, facing the impossible. In that moment, Thomas understood one thing clearly. His life would never be the same again. But he did not know yet that his small act of kindness, the choice he was about to make, would change not only his life, but the fate of many more. The night had just begun. The rain poured harder now, striking the roof of the barn like 1,000 tiny drums. Thunder shook the walls and flashes of lightning lit the night outside. Inside, the glow of the lantern flickered, throwing long shadows across the hay. Thomas sat frozen, his eyes locked on the small figure before him. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was fragile, almost weightless in appearance, yet every detail spoke of something beyond human. Its pale skin shimmered faintly, as if light itself lived under the surface. The strange silver lines on its arms and neck pulsed slowly, like veins carrying energy instead of blood. The farmer swallowed hard. His first instinct had been fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what others might say, fear of what this could mean. But now, staring at the trembling figure, fear gave way to something else. Pity. The creature was hurt, badly. The wound on its leg was deep, and the way it struggled to breathe told him it would not survive the night without help. But how could he help? He was no doctor. He didn't even know what this being was. Still, Thomas could not ignore it. He reached out slowly, his hand hovering above the figure. "Easy now," he whispered, his voice gentle. His words were simple, almost like he was speaking to a frightened animal. The alien girl flinched, her glowing eyes snapping open. She tried to push herself away, her small hands pressing weakly against the hay. For a moment, Thomas saw her face clearly. Her features were delicate, almost childlike. But her eyes held something ancient, something that felt far older than the body she was trapped in. Thomas froze, keeping his hand where it was. He didn't want to scare her more. Max, his dog, stayed behind him, ears low, no longer growling but watching carefully. Animals knew when something was harmless and when it was not. Max seemed to sense this being was no threat. Lightning flashed again, lighting up the barn, and in that instant Thomas saw something strange. A faint glow on the girl's chest. It flickered in rhythm with her breathing. Then he noticed something else, a small device half buried under the hay beside her. It was black, metallic, with lights that blinked weakly. His stomach turned. Was it part of her? Or was it something she carried? He leaned closer, curious, but the girl let out a sharp sound like a warning. Her hand lifted, glowing faintly again. Blue sparks danced between her fingertips. Thomas froze. The light crackled for only a moment, then died, leaving her weaker than before. Her body collapsed again into the hay, too exhausted to hold itself up. Thomas took a slow breath. His mind told him to run, to get out of there and call the authorities. But another voice whispered inside him. If he called them, this fragile creature would be taken away, studied, locked up. Maybe worse. He could not let that happen. Thomas set his lantern down and pulled out a small cloth from his coat pocket. His hand shook as he pressed it gently against the wound on her leg. She hissed in pain, her glowing eyes opening wide. "I know," Thomas said softly. "I know it hurts, but I'm not here to harm you." She stared at him, unblinking, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Slowly, carefully, Thomas tore strips from the edge of his coat and wrapped them around her leg, making a rough bandage. His fingers worked quickly, but his mind was still racing. He couldn't believe what he was doing, tending to something that wasn't even human. Yet it felt right. The girl shifted slightly, her eyes never leaving his face. She made another sound, soft this time, like a word carried on the wind. He didn't understand it, but the tone was different. Not fear, something closer to trust. Max moved forward, sniffing the air near her. The girl reached out a trembling hand. Her fingers brushed the dog's fur, and for a moment a faint light glowed again, softer this time. Max wagged his tail once. Thomas blinked. His dog never trusted strangers so quickly. He leaned back on his heels, staring at her. "You're not just lost, are you?" he whispered. "You're running from something." The girl's eyes flickered at his words as if she understood. She looked toward the broken wood at the barn wall, then back to him. Her lips moved again, but the sound was strange, like music with no tune. Thomas sighed. He didn't need to know the exact words. He could feel the meaning. She was afraid. She needed help. Outside, thunder rolled again, louder than before. The storm was growing, but so was the unease in Thomas's chest. He had made his choice. He lifted her carefully into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, almost weightless, as if she were made of more air than flesh. She let out a weak sound but did not resist. Her head rested against his chest, her glowing eyes dimming with exhaustion. Thomas carried her out of the barn, the lantern light bobbing beside him. The rain fell harder now, soaking his coat, but he didn't stop. He crossed the yard, heading toward his farmhouse. Inside, he would give her shelter. Inside, he would try to keep her safe. But as he walked, he didn't see the small device lying in the hay, half hidden under the broken wood. Its lights blinked faster now, red and urgent, sending a signal far beyond the stormy night. Thomas thought he had discovered a secret meant only for him. But others would soon come searching, and when they did, his act of kindness would put him in more danger than he could ever imagine. The storm raged outside as Thomas carried the small alien girl into his farmhouse. The lantern light shook with each step, shadows stretching across the wooden walls. Max padded beside him, quiet now, as if he too understood the weight of this moment. Thomas set the girl gently on the old sofa near the fireplace. She looked so fragile, her pale skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Water dripped from his coat onto the floor, but he ignored it. His eyes stayed fixed on her. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. The bandage on her leg was already soaked. Thomas hurried to the kitchen, grabbed a bowl of water, and returned with a clean cloth. He knelt down, pressing it gently against her wound. She flinched but did not push him away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of rain and thunder filled the silence. Thomas's mind raced. What was he doing? He was just a farmer. He had no training, no tools for this kind of injury. And more than that, this was not even human. Shouldn't he call someone? The authorities, maybe the military? They would know what to do. But then he remembered the way she had looked at him in the barn, those glowing eyes wide with fear. He remembered the weak sound she made when he touched her wound. She wasn't a monster. She was just lost, hurt, alone. Thomas clenched his jaw. No, he would not hand her over. Not yet. He didn't trust what others would do. To them, she would not be a child. She would be a thing to study, to lock away. He could not allow that. He made his choice. He would help her. The girl stirred slightly, her eyes opening. The silver lines on her skin flickered weakly. She looked at him, her lips moving. The words were strange, like soft notes of music, but Thomas could feel their meaning. She was asking, "Why?" "Because you need me," Thomas whispered. "And I won't let them take you." Her eyes softened, and for the first time her hand lifted without fear. She touched his arm, faint blue light spreading from her fingertips. It wasn't painful, it was warm, gentle, almost like a silent thank you. Thomas felt something shift inside him. This was no longer about curiosity or fear. This was about kindness. He stayed by her side for hours, changing the cloth, feeding the fire, listening to the storm outside. Max lay near the sofa, keeping watch. But while the farmhouse felt safe, the world beyond its walls was not. Far away, beyond the rolling fields and stormy skies, a signal moved through the night. The small device left behind in the barn had awakened fully. Its blinking red light was no accident. It was calling to someone or something that would soon come searching. Back in the farmhouse, the girl drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes she mumbled words in her strange tongue. Other times she reached for the crystal hanging from her neck, glowing faintly. Thomas noticed it when her hand fell away. The crystal pulsed gently, almost alive. He touched it carefully, and for a brief second a vision flashed in his mind. He saw fire, a burning sky, shapes of towering machines hunting small, fleeing figures like her, a scream, and then darkness. Thomas pulled back, breath heavy. His hand shook. What had he just seen? Was it a memory? A warning? The girl stirred again, her glowing eyes opening. She seemed to know what he had witnessed. Slowly, painfully, she whispered a word. One word he could almost understand. Hunters. Thomas's heart pounded. So it was true. She was being hunted. He looked around his small farmhouse. Old wood, thin walls, nothing but farmland for miles. He had chosen to protect her, but how long could he? Still, he could not turn back now. He tucked the blanket around her, stoked the fire, and sat down in his chair. His choice was made. Hours later, when the storm finally eased, Thomas's eyes grew heavy. He dozed off, lantern still burning low. But outside, in the wet fields, the first sign of danger arrived. Tire tracks cut into the mud. A black vehicle rolled slowly along the road, its headlights off. Inside, figures in dark uniforms scanned the area with strange equipment. A faint beep came from the screen one of them held. The man in charge smiled coldly. "The signal's close," he said. "She's here." Thomas woke suddenly, his chest tight. He didn't know why, but his instincts told him something was wrong. He stood, moving quietly to the window. The night was quiet now, too quiet. No crickets, no frogs, only silence. Then he saw it. Faint lights moving along the road, stopping near his property. His stomach turned to stone. He looked back at the girl. She was sleeping, her crystal glowing faintly on her chest. She had trusted him. She had placed her life in his hands. Thomas clenched his fists. His choice had been made long before. He would not betray her. If the hunters came, he would protect her. No matter the cost, the storm outside had passed. But a greater storm was about to begin, and in the middle of it stood one man, one farmhouse, and one choice of kindness that would change everything. The morning sun rose pale over the wet fields, shining through gray clouds that still carried the memory of the storm. Thomas had barely slept. He sat at the edge of the sofa, watching the small alien girl rest. Her breathing was steadier now, and the silver lines on her skin pulsed with a softer light. The farmhouse felt calm, but Thomas's mind was not. He kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see black vehicles waiting outside. The memory of lights on the road the night before stayed sharp in his head. He knew they would come again. The question was when. The girl stirred, her glowing eyes opening. She looked around the room slowly, confused for a moment, then her gaze fell on him. "You're safe," Thomas said quietly. "You're in my home." She blinked, her lips moving. The words that came out were strange, soft, but her tone was clearer than before. It was almost as if she was trying to shape her language to his. Thomas leaned forward. "Can you understand me?" The girl tilted her head. Then in a broken but careful voice, she spoke one word in English. "Safe." Thomas's eyes widened. His heart skipped a beat. She had understood him. He nodded quickly, relieved. "Yes, safe." For the first time, she didn't look afraid. Instead, she reached for the crystal on her chest and lifted it weakly. The faint glow inside brightened as if responding to her touch. The light grew until it spilled across the room. Thomas blinked, shielding his eyes, but when the glow softened, he gasped. It wasn't just light, it was pictures. Floating in the air above the crystal, images flickered like shadows made of fire and glass. He saw a great ship, shining and silver, flying through the dark of space. Then he saw fire and smoke, tall black figures with weapons chasing small glowing children like the girl in his home. Thomas's throat tightened. His hands curled into fists as he watched. The images shifted again, showing the girl herself, running, hiding, falling, and then the crash into his barn. The vision ended and the crystal dimmed again. Silence filled the room. Thomas looked at her, his chest heavy. They hurt your people, didn't they?" Her eyes lowered. She whispered one word, clear and sharp. "Hunters." The way she said it chilled him. Thomas rubbed his face with both hands. He had guessed before, but now it was certain. She was not just lost. She was escaping something powerful, something deadly, and they were coming here. The girl leaned forward suddenly, her glowing fingers brushing against his arm. This time Thomas felt more than warmth. A wave of thought like a whisper entered his mind. He saw her world again. Not just the fire, but the beauty before it. Fields of silver grass that glowed under twin suns. Children playing in the air as if gravity meant nothing to them. Cities that shone like crystal mountains, and then the darkness. Ships of iron and shadow filling the skies. The hunters. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but their cruelty was clear. They wanted her kind not as friends, but as property. Thomas pulled back, gasping. His heart pounded in his chest. The girl let her hand fall, weak again from the effort. But her eyes never left him. "You help?" she asked, her voice fragile but sure. Thomas swallowed hard. He didn't know how he could help. He was only one man with a farm, an old truck, and a shotgun he rarely used. But looking into her eyes, he knew his answer. "Yes," he said firmly. "I'll help you." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. For the rest of the morning, Thomas tended to her wound, gave her food and water, and listened as she tried to share more of her story. Her English was broken, but each hour she learned faster, her voice growing clearer. From what he understood, she was not alone in the universe. Her people were travelers, but peaceful ones. They avoided conflict, living far from war. The hunters were different. They took what they wanted, and now they wanted her, because of what she carried. Thomas's eyes flicked to the crystal on her chest. He had seen its power. If the hunters wanted it, it must be important. That evening, as the sun set, Thomas stepped outside to clear his head. The sky was red and gold, but his thoughts were heavy. He had made a promise to help her, yet he didn't know how. He was just one man against forces that could cross the stars. His gaze drifted to the distant road. It looked empty now, but he knew better. Somewhere out there, the hunters were closing in. He clenched his fists. If they came, they would find not just a farmer, but a man ready to fight for what was right. Back inside, the girl was standing now, leaning on the sofa. Her glowing eyes followed him as he entered. She lifted the crystal again, holding it out toward him. He frowned. "What is it?" She whispered a single word. "Key." Before Thomas could ask, the crystal lit up again. The walls of the farmhouse glowed with strange symbols, filling the room with shifting light. Thomas stared, amazed and afraid. The girl looked at him seriously. "Hide soon." Thomas felt a chill crawl up his spine. The hunters were closer than he thought, and now he realized this was not only about protecting her. The crystal she carried was more than a memory. It was something greater, something dangerous, something worth a war. The night returned heavy and quiet. The sky was clear now. Stars spread wide like cold fires in the dark. Thomas stood on his porch, shotgun resting against the wall. He had not used it in years, but tonight he wanted it close. His eyes scanned the empty road, his mind restless. Inside, the alien girl slept on the sofa, her chest rising and falling with steady rhythm. The crystal around her neck glowed faintly like a heartbeat. Max, the old dog, lay curled at her feet, protective and watchful. Thomas sighed. He had made his choice. He would help her no matter what. But even as he thought it, doubt gnawed at him. What could one man do against forces powerful enough to cross the stars? A sound broke his thoughts. Engines, low, steady, and too many. Thomas froze. The sound was far off at first, but growing louder, carried by the cool night air. He stepped off the porch, his boots crunching on the gravel. He narrowed his eyes toward the road, then he saw them. Dark vehicles, blacker than the night, rolling slowly without headlights. 4 of them. Their shapes were sharp, armored, nothing like normal cars or trucks. They stopped at the edge of his property, engines humming like predators breathing. Thomas's heart pounded. The front doors opened. Figures stepped out, tall and dressed in black suits that gleamed faintly under the starlight. Their helmets covered their faces, and each carried weapons unlike any Thomas had ever seen. Hunters. One of them held a device that beeped softly. Its screen glowed red. The man tilted his head, looking toward the farmhouse. Thomas's stomach dropped. They knew. He rushed inside, closing the door quickly but quietly. His hand shook as he grabbed the shotgun. The girl's eyes opened instantly, glowing faint in the dim room. She sat up, sensing the danger before he could speak. "They're here," Thomas whispered. The girl clutched the crystal to her chest. Her lips moved, a word in her strange tongue. Max barked once, sharp and loud, his body stiff with warning. Thomas blew out the lantern. Darkness swallowed the farmhouse, leaving only the faint glow of the crystal. He moved to the window, peeking through the curtain. The hunters spread out, their steps slow and precise. 2 moved toward the barn, scanning the ground with beams of red light. Another walked directly toward the house, weapon ready. Thomas's hands tightened on the shotgun. His breath came fast. He could fight, but if he fired, they would know for sure she was here. The girl stood now, weak but determined. She touched Thomas's arm, her glowing eyes locking with his. "Hide," she whispered. Her English was broken but clear. Thomas shook his head. "I'm not leaving you." The doorknob rattled. Thomas spun, raising the shotgun. His heart thundered in his chest. The door opened slowly, light from outside spilling in. A hunter stepped inside, tall and shadowed, weapon raised. For one long moment, no one moved. Then the girl lifted her hand. A sudden flash of blue light burst from her fingertips, crackling across the room. The hunter staggered back, his armor sparking. Thomas fired the shotgun at the same time, the blast shaking the walls. The hunter crashed against the porch, motionless. Silence returned for only a heartbeat. Then shouting filled the night. The other hunters rushed toward the house. "Go!" Thomas shouted. He grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her toward the back door. Max barked wildly, racing ahead. They ran into the night, the wet grass cold against their feet. Behind them, beams of red light cut through the darkness as the hunters fired strange weapons. Bolts of energy struck the ground, exploding dirt and wood. The girl stumbled, her wound slowing her, but Thomas lifted her into his arms. He ran as fast as his legs could carry them, heart pounding like a drum. They reached the old truck parked by the shed. Thomas shoved the girl inside, Max leaping in after her. He climbed into the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life just as a hunter appeared, weapon aimed. Thomas slammed his foot on the pedal. The truck lurched forward, tires spraying mud. A bolt of red energy struck the ground inches behind them. The truck sped across the field, bouncing hard over the wet earth. Thomas gripped the wheel tight, his eyes on the distant tree line. But in the rearview mirror, he saw them. The hunters had climbed into their vehicles, engines howling. Black machines with glowing lights chased across the fields, faster and stronger than his old truck. The girl clutched his arm. "Cliff," she whispered, pointing ahead. Thomas frowned, confused, but then remembered. The cliffside at the far end of his land. Beyond it stretched open sky and river. He drove faster, the truck rattling dangerously. The hunters closed in, beams of energy striking the ground beside them. Max growled, barking at the lights behind them. The girl touched the crystal. It flared bright, filling the cab with white-blue light. Thomas squinted, nearly blinded. The air around them hummed with strange energy. The hunters drew closer, but the crystal's glow seemed to push them back, their machines sputtering as if struggling against unseen force. Thomas gritted his teeth. The cliff was near now, the trees breaking open to reveal the edge. The roar of the river below filled the night. The girl looked at him, her eyes glowing fiercely. "Trust," she said. Thomas pressed the pedal harder. Behind them, the hunters shouted, their vehicles closing fast. Ahead, only the cliff waited. The choice was clear, and once again Thomas would make it. The old truck roared across the field, mud spraying behind its tires. Thomas gripped the wheel with both hands, his knuckles white. The headlights cut through the darkness, bouncing with every bump, but he didn't slow down. Behind them, the hunters' vehicles tore across the land like shadows with glowing eyes. The girl sat in the passenger seat, clutching the crystal against her chest. Its blue light spilled across the cab, mixing with the yellow glow of the dashboard. Max barked from the back, his growls low and angry. Thomas's heart pounded in his ears. The hunters were faster. Their machines glided over the ground like predators, engines humming with a strange power. Every time Thomas looked in the mirror, they were closer. A sudden blast of red energy struck the dirt just ahead, exploding into sparks and smoke. Thomas jerked the wheel, swerving to avoid it. The truck bounced hard, nearly throwing them off the seat. The girl cried out, clutching the door. Thomas shouted, "Hold on!" Another shot came, this time striking the back of the truck. The metal screeched, smoke rising from the impact. The old machine shuddered but kept moving. Thomas gritted his teeth. He knew the truck couldn't last long. The cliff was near now, hidden by the line of dark trees. He could hear the river below, its roar rising in the night. The girl pointed ahead, her voice urgent. There. Thomas drove faster, the trees rushing toward them. But just as he reached the edge of the woods, another vehicle cut across the side, blocking their path. Its headlights blazed white, blinding him. Damn it, Thomas cursed, slamming the brakes. The truck skidded in the wet grass, spinning halfway before stopping. The hunters surrounded them. 3 vehicles closed in, forming a half circle. The 4th blocked the way to the cliff. Red lights glowed on their weapons. Thomas's chest heaved. He raised the shotgun, but deep down he knew it was useless against their armor. The girl placed a hand on his arm. Her eyes glowed fiercely in the dark. Trust. Before Thomas could reply, she pushed open the truck door and stepped out. Wait, he shouted, but it was too late. The girl stood in the open, the crystal blazing bright against her chest. The hunters aimed their weapons, but she lifted both hands. Blue light erupted from her body, crackling like lightning. The ground shook. The hunters' machines sputtered, their engines whining as if choked by unseen force. Sparks flew from their weapons, some exploding in their hands. Thomas stared in shock. She was powerful, far more than he had realized. But he also saw her body trembling, the glow flickering like a candle in wind. She was burning herself out. He jumped out of the truck, running to her side.
Stop! You'll kill yourself!
She shook her head, her glowing eyes fixed on the hunters. Go, she whispered. Run, Thomas looked toward the cliff. It was the only chance. If they could reach it, maybe her people could find them. Maybe the crystal could call them. He grabbed her arm. Not without you. Together they ran. Max barked, leaping ahead into the trees. The girl stumbled, her energy fading, but Thomas held her up, dragging her forward. Behind them, the hunters fought against the blue force. One of their vehicles roared back to life, smashing through the trees after them. The forest was dark, branches slapping Thomas's face, roots catching his boots. But he didn't stop. The roar of the river grew louder. The ground tilted downward. The cliff was close. The girl lifted the crystal weakly. It pulsed brighter, sending a beam of light into the sky. The hunters shouted behind them, their voices sharp and angry. Energy bolts tore through the trees, burning leaves, splitting wood. One struck the ground so close Thomas felt the heat on his skin. Faster, he gasped, pulling the girl along. Then the trees broke open. The cliff stretched wide before them, the river raging far below. The wind whipped against their faces, carrying the mist of water. The girl stopped, her body shaking. She raised the crystal high, its light blazing like a star. Thomas shielded his eyes. Above them, the night sky seemed to tear open. A distant hum filled the air, deep and powerful. Then he saw it. A ship. It descended silently from the clouds, silver and glowing, its shape unlike anything human. The air vibrated as it drew closer, beams of light spreading across the cliff. The girl looked at Thomas, her voice soft. Safe now, but the hunters were not done. Their vehicles burst from the trees, weapons ready. Energy bolts cut through the air, striking the ground near the cliff. Thomas pulled the girl closer, his heart racing. The ship above sent down a beam of pure light, wrapping around her. She began to rise, her body lifting gently from the earth. Thomas reached for her. Wait! Her glowing hand touched his cheek, warm and gentle. Kind, she whispered. You saved me. Then she pressed the crystal into his hands. Before Thomas could respond, the light carried her upward. She rose higher toward the ship, her small figure glowing against the night sky. The hunters fired wildly, but the beams shattered against the ship's shield. A deep hum shook the earth, and with a flash, the ship vanished into the stars, leaving silence behind. Thomas stood at the cliff, breathless, the crystal glowing in his hand. Behind him, the hunters froze. Their leader lowered his weapon slowly. The signal was gone. Their prey had escaped, but their eyes turned toward Thomas. He was no longer just a farmer. Now, he was holding the key. The cliffside was silent now, the roar of the river below the only sound breaking the night. The ship was gone, vanishing into the stars with the small alien girl safe inside. But Thomas did not feel relief. He stood frozen, breathing hard, the crystal glowing in his hand. It pulsed softly like a living thing, sending warmth up his arm. His heart was heavy. She was gone, yet her last words lingered in his ears. Kind, you saved me. Behind him, the hunters shifted. Their black helmets reflected the faint blue glow of the crystal. One of them stepped forward, raising his weapon. Thomas turned slowly. His shotgun was gone, his truck destroyed. He was alone. But the crystal's light grew brighter, stronger, as if answering his fear. The hunters hesitated. Their leader lifted a hand, signaling the others to stop. He spoke in a language Thomas could not understand, harsh, metallic. But the meaning was clear enough. Take the human alive. Thomas gripped the crystal tighter. Over my dead body, he muttered. The leader raised his weapon. Before he could fire, the crystal blazed white. A shockwave of energy burst out, slamming into the hunters. Their weapons flew from their hands, their vehicles screeched and died. Sparks sprang from broken engines. The ground shook beneath their feet. Thomas staggered back, shielding his eyes. When the light faded, the hunters were on the ground, struggling to rise. He stared at the crystal in disbelief. It wasn't just a keepsake. It was power. And somehow it had chosen him. The hunters regrouped quickly. Their leader ripped off his broken helmet, revealing a scarred, pale face with dark eyes that burned with hate. He pointed at Thomas, shouting to the others. They advanced again, slower this time, wary of the crystal. Thomas's heart pounded. He didn't know how the crystal worked or how long it would protect him. But he felt something inside, like the girl's presence still lingered, guiding him. He lifted the crystal. If you want it, he said through clenched teeth, you'll have to come through me. The crystal answered. Symbols of light spread across the ground, circling him. They rose into the air, forming shapes like wings made of energy. The hunters stopped, their eyes wide. One of them fired in panic. The energy bolt struck the barrier of light and dissolved instantly. Thomas's body shook. He wasn't just holding the crystal anymore. It was inside him, filling him, connecting him to something vast and endless. He saw flashes, stars, worlds, entire galaxies. The girl's people? Her voice whispered in his mind, not alone, never alone. The hunters backed away, their leader shouting orders, but their fear was clear. They had failed. For the first time in his life, Thomas felt more than a farmer. He felt like a guardian. The battle ended without another shot. The hunters retreated to their broken machines, dragging their wounded leader. Engines sputtered, then roared weakly as they fled into the night, leaving Thomas alone at the cliff. He fell to his knees, exhausted, the glow fading around him. The crystal dimmed but did not go dark. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat waiting for its next call. Max padded to his side, nuzzling his arm. Thomas rubbed the dog's head with a tired smile. "It's just you and me now, boy," he whispered. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The girl had given him more than the crystal. She had given him purpose days past. The farmhouse bore scars of the fight, burned wood, shattered glass, broken fences. But Thomas repaired what he could. He worked the fields by day, watched the skies by night, sometimes when the wind was quiet. He swore he heard her voice, soft, gentle, reminding him he was not forgotten. The crystal remained with him always. He kept it close, hidden under his shirt. At night, when he held it, visions came, starscapes, distant worlds, even the faint outline of the girl smiling. But with the visions came warnings. He saw ships in the dark, hunters gathering, their armies growing. They had failed once, but they would return. Thomas knew then this was not the end. It was only the beginning. One evening, as the sun sank red over the fields, Thomas stood on his porch, the crystal glowing faintly in his palm. He thought of the girl's words. "Your kindness saved me, but many more need saving." He wasn't sure how, but he understood. The crystal had chosen him not by chance, but by design. He was no longer just a farmer. He was a keeper of something far greater. Max barked suddenly, looking at the horizon. Thomas followed his gaze. High above, a faint light streaked across the sky. At first, it looked like a star. But it grew brighter, moving faster. Thomas clenched the crystal. His chest tightened, they were coming back, but this time he was ready. The night had begun with fear and ended with destiny. The farmer who once only tended his fields now held the power of worlds in his hands. And somewhere in the stars, a small alien girl whispered to her people about the human who chose kindness, the kindness that would change everything.